What's good, Salvi fam? Here we are for episode 68 of the Corner Blue. I'm Andres Rico and I'm here with Hugo Alvarado. What's up, everybody? It's been a bit, but here we are with another episode to just talk about the recent news coming out of El Salvador. Wanted to go over the friendly matches coming up, and along with that, the latest list by new coach David Doniga. How you doing, Hugo?
Pretty good. Excited to see some La Selecta action. It seems like from here until the beginning of the qualifiers, we're gonna have a lot of action going on between the three matches in March, the match against Cadiz in June, rumors of another potential game in June. Then we have the U20 in July. So yeah, it seems like it's gonna be a very exciting and busy time for La Selecta.
Definitely. I mean, we've already had a couple of friendly matches with the senior squad. La Zulita made it to the next phase of the Premundial. And then, of course, I'd say the cherry on top so far has been the women's side performance, qualifying to the Women's Gold Cup and, getting its first strides, making its first baby steps in a tournament of that level. And I think it's been an amazing ride for them, and you just hope that they can keep building off of that. Unfortunately, they couldn't walk away with their first dub in said tournament, but I'm glad they finally got the goal into the net in the third match against Paraguay. Um, Moving on though, so obviously the latest news coming out is the new list, the first official international window, FIFA window call up by David Donia. So you see the incorporation of players based abroad, something that he hadn't been able to do with the friendly matches that have been played so far during his tenure. Okay, so for the call up for the three friendly matches in March. At goalkeeper, we have Super Mario, Oscar Pleites, and Tomas Romero. I'd say, the third wheel there has been the one up in the air, throughout the last couple of calls, but that duo of Mario and Tomas has been pretty steady, pretty consistent. So it's nice to have both of them back. And then the defense, I think here's where we see a lot of, changes in comparison to previous calls up. We have Rudy Clavel, Julio Cibrián, Adán Clímaco, Jorge Cruz, Melvin Cruz, and Germán Fuentes. What are your conclusions in terms of the defensive call-ups, Hugo?
I think one important factor to point out here, and this is interesting in the way the list is presented. Um, all five players that you mentioned, I think there are five or four,
Six.
six players.
Yeah.
All six players are center backs, all of them. And that's in part due to the system that the coach uses. So when you read the midfielders, you'll see that there's going to be some of the outside backs on that list that are considered midfielders under this setup. Well, I mean, there's some of the players who've been consistent under Doniga. With the two previous games, the two Cruz have been there. Cibrian was there, against Inter Miami. I don't think Cibrian was called for the Costa Rica game, but Doniga knows him. I think and then Climaco, who returns after playing a few minutes against Costa Rica. And then Fuentes, who it will be his second call up to the national team. An interesting player to watch. I'm not too surprised considering, some of the factors that we know that Zabaleta is not going to be there, and Caballete is injured. So there's not a whole lot of options out there. There are the Dominguez, who, I don't think he's having a very good beginning of the tournament in El Salvador. The same for Ronald Rodriguez. Romulo Villalobos had an opportunity. He was called up to a few camps and he didn't seem to have made the cut. So I'm not too surprised considering the options that we have available at the moment. I think it's a pretty consistent. The call up for defenders is pretty consistent to what we've seen in the past two games. And now, given that this is a FIFA window, then you can call up players like Fuentes and Climaco.
Yeah, I feel like the center back spot, is still a little bit up for grabs, especially with the absence of Zabaleta, Cabalceta, and I mean it will be interesting to see if, obviously with the minute management, Doniga's mentioned in other interviews that that's something that they have to consider, with this three fixture window is minute management. So feel like we're definitely going to be able to see all six of these guys at some point. So that'll be exciting to see how that plays out. Moving along with the midfield, and like you mentioned, this list is stacked. I mean, granted, I feel like it's always strong point has always been the midfield, but now with the new system where they're going to be, Doniga's shown that he likes to play with the 3-5-2. You have to populate that midfield, and some of those wingers will move up a little bit, and that's why this midfield call up is pretty stacked. So you have Darwin Seren, Brian Tamacas, Narciso Orellana, Melvin Cartagena, Cristian Martinez, Amando Moreno, Mayer Gil, Pablo Puñed, Kevin Santamaría, Jairo Enríquez, Diego Flores, and Nelson Flores to close out the midfield. Um, so I'm liking the midfield. It's good to see Narciso back. Um, I think the main standout here in terms of the midfield is seeing Pablo Puñed getting called back. It's been a bit, and also the return of Jairo Enriquez. Um, what's your take on the midfield, or how are you feeling about the call-ups?
I think in terms of midfielders, this is the best we have. Um, I I don't know if there's any player that I would say with the exception of Enrico, who has been injured for 7 weeks. He just got back. I think that if Enrico had been playing the way he was prior to the injury, where he was a starting player for Top Os, I think he would have been on this roster. So with the exception of him, I like what I see. I like the return of Punyet. I think he's a player who can bring a lot to the table, both on the field and outside of the field, with his experience abroad, with his upbringing in the United States, but also having a very, very strong connection with El Salvador. And I just think overall he's a very mature player in many ways. I think he can bring a lot to the group. So I'm very happy to see him. Santa Maria, he's a player who De La Barrera called up. I must say, when De La Barrera called him up, I was expecting a little more of him, and I didn't see what I thought I was going to see of him on that game that he played. So hopefully, now that he's back in the first division in Peru, he's in a different rhythm. But yeah, I like the list, and this is look. If it's not now, when? This is the opportunity to watch, to observe those players. For Donia to observe his pool of players for June. So I think that it was probably hard to put the list together because there's so many players that you want to see. But I think he's calling up the um, the best players that are available at the moment. Um, with the difficulty of USL just starting last weekend, so he hasn't really had a whole lot of opportunities to observe those players yet. So I wouldn't be surprised if by June, there might be a few other players that might be doing well in USL who might show up on that list for June. But I like the list. Again, I think it's probably the best we have at this time.
No, I'm pretty happy to see Pablo Puñez back. Shout out to Pablo. I think the leadership that he brings, and this is something that some of the listeners and other fans know this as well, is the leadership that he brings is something that this team could have used a couple years back. I think it's been a long time coming. I think he represents a bridge not only generationally but also culturally in a way that, it could have helped to have someone like Pablo around when you brought in, a lot of the foreign-based players for the last qualifying process. Um, and so I'm looking forward to seeing his leadership reflected on and off the pitch. Um, um, I'm glad to see him back and hope that he can help control the midfield, and work with game management depending on um, obviously the tactics, the game situation, whether he's going to be a starter or a super sub, or you bring him in to gain possession of the ball, depending on the situation. I think he brings that dynamic that he can play multiple roles. But more than anything, if you want to fill up that midfield and win the ball back or gain possession, I think that's someone that you want in there, someone with the level head. So props to Pablo Puñez for coming back. I'm really stoked. And then it's great to see Heido back. There were issues in terms of his work visa and things like that that hadn't allowed him to leave El Salvador. But with the games being on U.S. soil, that's not going to be an issue. And hopefully everything's sorted out come June. So it'll be good to see him make his comeback. And I think the main importance with this midfield is you see the standouts of the last couple of years there mixed with a couple of the veterans. And I know Darwin Seren had a pretty decent match against Inter Miami, so it only makes sense that he would get continuation on this squad. Narciso's going to have to showcase himself considering this is his first time tending to a call up under Doniga. So it'll be interesting how he plays his pieces, whether he's looking for physicality, height, who plays better off the ball. Um, we're gonna be playing with your traditional outside backs, but also where's he gonna free up some of that creativity or being able to build up in a way that El Salvador's been lacking in the last couple of years. That's what I'm definitely looking forward to see is how Doniga interprets and uses the midfield. Because from Hugo Perez's tenure to now, I feel like there's been moments where we've showcased that game management, trying to control the tempo of the game, the possession, marking as well, not just, on the offensive end of things, but the cohesion and getting to that last third of the pitch, getting to the box, getting numbers in the box in the final third, I feel is what has been lacking the last couple of years and is, the the winless streak is kind of due to that. You can't win games if you're not scoring goals. And so that's what I'm looking forward to see his interpretation of how to use these players in the midfield. All right, and now to close off, we'll close off with the forwards. We have Brian Hill, Javier Ferman, Nelson Bonilla, and the surprise to many, Nathan Ordaz. What's your take on the forwards, Hugo?
Again, I mean, I don't think you can argue with that call up. I cannot think of a forward who I would say, "Oh, this guy should have been there instead of." Like you're taking the best forward in the local league, Ferman. Whether or not he's struggled in the national team, uh, he's been consistently the best forward in the local league in the last couple of tournaments. Bonilla, I like. I know that a lot of people say, "Oh, Bonilla again." I I really like what Bonilla did against Inter Miami. I think he's a guy who makes the right movements, who's a leader on the field as well. Um, so I think he should be there. And then Brian Hill, I think we never doubted that he should be one of our forwards all the time. And now he's even had a good beginning of the season in Colombia. He scored a couple of goals. Um, so and then Ordaz, Ordaz has been in the radar for a while. Um, so it's good to see him there. Good to see him get some. Hopefully, he gets some minutes in one of the games, possibly the first game. Um, and yeah, he's also a guy. He's very young, but he's been getting some minutes in MLS. So I think it's a good list of forwards.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the surprises with Ordaz, it's something that, seemed to play out at least for two years ish. Um, and that's awesome that he's decided to try things out with La Selecta. I read earlier there was confusion or it was up in the air as to whether or not he had his passport. Um, but regardless of whether that's confirmed or not, since the friendly against Bondera or Bonaire is, not an official, it's not necessarily an official FIFA sanctioned match because they're not recognized by FIFA, right? If I'm not mistaken.
They're not recognized. Yeah, they're not a member of FIFA, and also I think the game is gonna have uh 9 subs. Uh,
So like a glorified scrimmage in a sense.
right. So after you make more, I think it's more than 7 subs. I think the
Mhm.
game is no longer considered a official friendly match.
So, I mean, we have yet to see if the courting process is still open or if this is something that's secure. That time will tell with everything that's gone on. I won't necessarily believe it till I see him in, a FIFA sanctioned game, but I mean, obviously it's positive news that he is going to be a part of camp and be a part of the process and meet the coaching staff. Um, so on Twitter, I posted earlier what people were thinking about it. So I was going to share some feedback. All right. So we have a question from Robert Rodriguez wondering about Caballeta, No Leo, or the young forward from Metapan. And in terms of El Machito, he's still, it seems that he's still trying to get game fit or get get back to the level that he was when he was taken into consideration and signed by Alajuelense. He had that basically semester from doom where he wasn't getting minutes and ended up signing with Alianza here in El Salvador. So it seems like he's still trying to find his fitness and get into a groove again. And then with Gabalceta, I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, but we've talked about how he's coming back from an injury, so he's also not not necessarily game fit, and thus we're not taken into consideration. Josue Munguia says that Dueñas and Cabalceta are two players that we need. Um, Jonathan says don't call up Zabaleta and Roldan again. That's something that we can get into in a little bit. The editor says, meh, so many years of the same thing. I'm not optimistic. Steven says, honestly, perfect. Only players we are missing are Enrico and Roldan. Besides that, there's nothing more you can call. And the homie Carlitos Q's or Cuze says, interesting. Happy to see Pablo back. I do think we need some veterans here and there. I'm excited to see Ordaz. Zito Cafe says, I like it. Punez has positive leadership. Bonilla is a smart player and can help Brahim. I like that Boniga is mixing experience with youth. And to close out, Suffix Berry says, love seeing Nathan Ordaz. The kid can ball. Um, yeah, so I think with most of that, I mean, I agree. You know, the player pool isn't necessarily getting much bigger, you know, than we would like to. And I think trying to find that right mix of veterans and new players is the key to finding success in the short term and obviously looking long term. But I think the veterans bring that experience that can anchor things down to hold things down when, you know, stress levels are high on and off the pitch. And I think that's something that this team has been lacking the last couple of years is just being able to affront different situations, whether it's discipline on and off the pitch, dealing with the administrative woes, dealing with the weight that a winless streak carries. You've seen the effects on this team, and hopefully Boniga is able to get that mix that can, you know, turn the page over and look to what's most important in the immediate future, and that's those qualifying matches in June. Um, so let's move on to the next subject. You know, another issue or topic that has hit social media and also sports broadcasts in El Salvador is the issue of Roldan and Zabaleta opting out. Obviously, it's a delicate issue. It's something that has played out in different versions, not only through the process of calling them up or getting them to play and opting in and playing for El Salvador in the past, but also just the issues that have come up for them, and not just for them, but the entire team the last couple of years since they accepted their first call up and got their first caps for La Azul. Um, my take on it, uh, you know, obviously I'm an outsider. I'm not in these players' shoes. Um, there's as a fan, there's always a level of romanticism, uh, a, a level of a level of romanticism and a level of putting the national team and the concept of the national team or the jersey on a pedestal or looking up to it, something that's very, I mean, and I know it sounds a little ridiculous, but it's something like spiritual, it's cultural, it's something very personal. And to have someone reject it in a sense, I know can touch many egos or can you know, it's something counterintuitive to the fan, you know, because we feel these colors, we feel this jersey. You ask any fan or any kid, any person that grew up as a kid playing soccer, si te llama la selecta, ¿qué haces? You know, like the any fan would say, no, a huevo, estoy. Um, and even, you know, even for me, like, you know, I grew up in the United States. I never really liked the US men's team. If, you know, someone would have told me that, I'd be like, yeah, of course I'd pick El Salvador over the US. But that's just a personal choice, you know, as a fan, it's theoretical. And I don't know. I think the easiest way to interpret the situation from afar, obviously, is just the vibe I get or the feeling I get from all this is like, you know, when you're dealing with that side of the family, you know. And what I mean by that is that side of the family that's not too close to you. You know of them, you haven't spent too much time, but that one summer they invite you to go visit them, and you're like a little hesitant, and you go, and boom, you get that culture shock. They're not as like warm to you. Maybe they're colder. Maybe they made promises of places you were gonna see, and you just end up getting stuck going to church or visiting your tia, things like that. Or you find them kind of going through your wallet. while you're not in your room, things like that, just shady business. Um, and that's something that I went through as a kid. I remember going to see a Tia and bringing my girlfriend from the States and wanting to do stuff like go hang out, get out of the house. But because of the security issues and whatnot, we were stuck at my tia's house the whole dang time. And, you get desperate, you get cabin fever, not being able to leave. I remember the one time we left, we went to like some like pool hall with one of my friends, one of the neighbors, and we walked. It was like a block or a couple blocks away from my tia's house. And literally within like 15 minutes of getting in there, my tia had sent my cousin to go pick us up because he snitched on us. So he went to go pick us up. She told him, go get them. It's not safe there. We had just ordered our beers. We didn't get to finish them. We had to go back. Anyway, tia, I love you, but that's how I felt going to see you. So I feel like there has to have been some sort of culture shock, some type of just roce or uh being confronted with the realities of being on the national team and what that entails, to put that in the most nice way. And I think it's up to you whether, up to the person, the individual, whether they're going to subject themselves to certain conditions, what they can tolerate, what they cannot tolerate. And as someone that is obviously outside of that situation, from my perspective, I see both sides of this. As a fan, you want the top players to be there. But then also knowing some of the issues that go along with our culture at different levels, and that even you can see it in soccer. I don't blame people for not wanting to necessarily expose themselves. Like our whole little hashtag for this podcast is this kid chose me. And that's true. We can't choose some random nationality, like regardless, you're still gonna be Salvadoran in one way or another. I can't walk around with the Spain jersey if I don't have family there. I don't have direct links there and just be La Roja all day, like no, like in any case, I feel like a situation like this, just like choosing to represent a country is very personal. I think it's unfortunate that, you know, um, sides couldn't come together or figure things out one way or another. We're gonna definitely miss players of their profile, their level. Um, but at this point, all you can do is change the page. I was hoping that would happen considering it was with the new coach. But for whatever reasons, it isn't to be for this window, and who knows if that door is still open to them come qualifying time. I know I've been rambling a lot, but I feel like that's my take, man. Like I remember going to La Unión as a kid to see my bisabuela, who everyone on my side or yeah, my family thought was kind of mean, and we went to go visit her. And like the beds like were very different from what I was used to. Like, it was basically like a wooden frame with like reed on it, like a basket. And there were a shit ton of zancudos, no fans. And it's not that I think that we were fresa or anything like that, but coming from, the US and then going to those types of conditions, like it's a huge, huge jump. And I think I don't know if anything, that's kind of what I interpret in essence is just that shock of the differences and things are handled. I don't know. What's your take, Google?
If you guys are wondering why Andres is talking so much, is because I decided to pull myself out of this conversation. Um, I'm too in it. I
No,
think in
I
some
get
way,
it.
in some ways. Look, it it's a personal choice. Everybody has that choice. Um, I think, like Andres said, I hear both sides. Um, like a clear example, maybe for me, it could be like I do what I do, and I don't get pay a penny for it, and I still do it. I've been doing it for 12 years. Fine. I don't expect everybody to do the same thing. It's just me. It's my choice, and I made that choice to do that. And I hear people saying, "Oh, you should be paid for what you do," and don't do that for free, and all those things. I
Hashtag
hear
pay this
them.
man.
I mean, trust me, I hear that, and yet I still do it. It's my choice. Um, I think that it's important not to fall on the get too romantic about it, and be like, we don't need to be begging anyone. I don't think anybody's begging anyone. It I think the coach was very clear. We called them up and they declined this time. But that's not begging, it's so I don't think I wouldn't see it that way. And I do hear, I think there must have been an aspect of culture shock, because I think I think I would be lying if I say otherwise. I was born in El Salvador, and I lived there until I was 9, and then I've been living in the States for 30 years now. So when I go back, I notice the differences. They're big differences. And as much as I love being there, because I do, especially this last time I was there for the Inter Miami game, a lot of things have changed in the country, uh, with the things you can do and how safe you feel doing things there. There's one thing being in San Salvador where I feel like kind of like being here, but feeling in a tropical country at the same time, which is it's very cool, and it helps me to connect with the country. And then there is a different world when I go visit my cousins and who live way different, in El Congo. Um, so yes, there's a culture shock, but I think the guys knew that going in. So I think there's more to it. Um, I think the probably the best way I can put it is that it's a different culture. Culturally here in the States, things are done differently. Um, I mean, I'll give you an example. Um, Purdy, when Purdy was playing for the national team, there were bonuses that he was never able to get because, and again, please don't confuse anything that I'm saying with the current case. Not at all. I'm just giving an example of bonuses that he couldn't get for years, and he never ended up getting, because the only way to get them was to be there in person physically, to get a check from a Salvadorian bank, and he had to go cash the check over there. And from an American perspective, you're like, why can't you just wire me the money? I mean, so there are things that work very differently, and when you come from a different culture, you expect things to be different, and sometimes you want to, there's a lot of talk about wanting to change certain things with the way players are treated over there, but yet at the same time, there are journalists saying that players should take whatever they get over there because that's the situation, that's the reality of El Salvador. Then how are you going to ever be able to change something if you continue to be part of it and are not willing to speak up about it and follow through with action? So again, I just don't want to get involved in it. I think it's just a personal choice that everyone has. And if there's one thing I've learned in sports, in football, with the work that I do, is that I rather like people say, el fútbol da vueltas, la vida da vueltas, and I think that there are times when it's better just to kind of let it go and let's let it play out. Because guess what? If Roldan or Zabaleta are back in June and they score a goal, I'm going to celebrate the goal like nothing ever happened. I'm not going to celebrate it less because of what happened now. So to me, it's just like, yeah, bummer, because I do think that there are two players that can make a big difference in the national team. But they have made a different choice this time, and I don't know, for good or for bad. I'm not gonna be judging them or the situation. I think we just have to move on with the players that we have, and who knows down the line, if there's gonna be another opportunity for them. I don't know that, but it's yeah, this time it was, and this is not the first time we've seen this. We've had Arturo Alvarez at some point decline a call up for the national team.
More than one,
Even
more than one, and he
Yeah,
had his reasons too.
even the Salvadorian born. There's been some Salvadorian born players, so this is not an issue with the foreign born players.
This
That
is just real
I
life.
understand that
It's not football
hits.
manager, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I know that that's better for clicks and for, to go viral, to say, oh yeah, they don't feel the colors that I understand all of that, but we've seen this with players born in El Salvador who at some point have
Nelson,
declined a call
Nelson
up to the
declined to
national
call up.
team.
Nelson declined to call up because he wanted to focus more on his club, or he wasn't feeling it in terms of treatment from fans or press, whatever it may be. But we've seen this type of scenario play out before, like you mentioned. Is it a bummer? Yes. Is it set in stone forever? Uh, it's too early to tell. Um, and like we said, all you can do is move on. And yeah, like the whole family analogy, if I may, it's like as a kid, you're stuck going, right? To go see family as a kid, you're stuck. You got to listen to authority. You got to listen to your family. There's a certain way of doing things. But then once you get older, you don't necessarily have to go to El Salvador for vacation every summer. So in any case, what I'm going at is this sense of agency that these players have and should have. Um, and when whatever the reasons may be, it's up to them. And I think the only thing that can happen out of this is, the next man standing has to be ready for the call up. And another thing that we mentioned, this is to close out, like, yeah, there's sometimes we put too much romanticism on the national team, but at the end of the day, it's a cause, right? uh, with a lot of gray areas in terms of business, logistics, different people involved for different reasons. Obviously, the most romantic level is national pride and competing and making it to the World Cup. But I think the important thing moving forward is that there is that sense of a cause, and that, people at the helm see it for what it's worth, and the opportunity that is right there. It's within grasp despite all the fuck ups. All the fuck ups. It's right there. So what we can expect to see is if people rise to the occasion, see that cause, and work towards a common goal. And we'll see, you know. And we'll close out with that. Well, thanks again for recording today. Thanks for your input. Thanks to everybody for tuning in, liking, subscribing. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I kind of let that go. No offense to Meta, but we appreciate you guys. And we'll be back. Once the games get started. We're always trying to get guests. We'll see whose streak ends quickest, whether La Selecta's winless streak ends before we get a guest on. So we'll see. Make your bets, ladies and gentlemen. But until then, we'll see you guys next time. And hashtag this kid chose me.